Today we're going to test out some cheaper options for fuel pressure regulators and try to find out which one is best. Let me show you what we're going to be testing. These are all deadhead style regulators because that's what the GMC truck is running, so that's what we're going to concentrate the test on. Down the road, I'll probably do one that's a return style or a bypass style regulator when we get the Chevelle back up and on the road, because that's what it's going to use, is one that'll return some unused fuel back to the tank. But for now, let's just talk about the deadhead, which is quite honestly the most frequently used type of regulator on the market today. Now, here's how I went about choosing these. These are ones that are either on the shelf at local auto parts stores here in the U.S. The Spectra at AutoZone, I think O'Reilly's has a Mr. Gasket, and the Holly, and occasionally you'll find an O'Reilly's that has the Edelbrock regulator as well. But they're the most common. So if you were in a bind on a Sunday afternoon, you couldn't get to online to order anything, and you're not going to get it the same day anyway, these are what you could find at a local auto parts store. And quite honestly, they sell a ton of these things, so there's a lot of them out in the marketplace, so it should be pretty easy. So let's do this. Let's crack these open, get them all laid out on the bench. We'll kind of talk about what we're going to get into here. But I will tell you that this test started almost a year and a half ago, because I didn't want to run a regulator for an hour or two and then say, well, this one was good, this one was bad, or, well, they all pretty much perform the same. You can't really find out. You need to put them in some long-term durability type testing situations to really make a good, accurate description or good, accurate accounting of what happened. So that's what I did. It's taken me a long time. If you've seen some of the other past videos I've done, I've had the Holly regulator on there. You've seen the Edelbrock regulator, and you've also seen recently in some videos the Mr. Gasket one. So I've got some opinions on them, but quite honestly, they haven't been really founded in anything. They're just based on what I've heard other people talk about. But anyway, so these are the two that I generally use, and then the Gasket one and the Spectra one. I've never used the Spectra one, but you'll see here in a minute, it looks vaguely familiar. So now that we've got all that away, let's crack them out of the box and talk about each one of them individually. As far as pressure regulators go, they're pretty standard. I guess there's not really much to talk about. They regulate pressure between a certain PSI and a max PSI. And most of these, I believe, I'll have to look at the packaging on the Spectra, because that one I'm not entirely sure about. But they generally rate them for around 3.5 to 4, or 3.5 to 7 PSI. Now, you have to be careful, because there is other low pressure regulators out there for the Stromberg guys, the lawnmower engine guys, and most of the auto parts stores they'll have a lower pressure option on the shelf. So sometimes you just got to be careful of it. Just read the packaging really quickly. I know that's a complicated thing for some of us, but you have to do it. Now let's talk about price real quick, because there's some differences in here, and I'm going to have to look up some of these because I don't remember what I paid for them. The Mr. Gasket pump was $52.99. The Holly pump was $46.99. Edelbrock is the highest at $141.95, and the Spectra pump came in at $49.99. So three really cheap and expensive ones. One's a little bit higher, but the reason why I included the Edelbrock one is, one, some of the auto parts stores do have access to that on the shelf, and I think O'Reilly is probably the one that has it the quickest, maybe. I don't know. You'd have to check. Now that we got that done, let me tell you about how we're going to test these. Initially, my plan was to try to put about 500 miles on each one of them, but in all honesty, it just really wasn't something I could do, just the amount of time. The Holly and the Edelbrock are probably the ones that are closest to that. I think I'm over 500 on the Edelbrock test. The Holly, I know that I'm over that as well. The Mr. Gasket one is one that I've been testing here recently, and I think I'm probably around 400. I'll have to look back and look at the logs and see, but if I remember correctly, that's about where we're at. The Spectra, again, we're going to try to put around that, the 300 to 500 mile test on it. So I've got a long road trip here coming up very soon, and that's the reason why I started this now. That way we could talk about these individually. And then, I'll go ahead and record this. But I will tell you, with all of these, Edelbrock included, as the higher priced and should be the higher quality as it's a billet regulator is with each one of these, I carried a backup. If I was testing, the Holly, I had the Edelbrock with me. If I was testing the Mr. Gasket, I think I had the Holly and the Edelbrock with me in the truck. And for the Spectra one, because it's the most easiest, I will take a Holly regulator with me and probably the Edelbrock as well. As long as you got the fuel lines and the hookup, it's not that big of a deal. So that's the amount of miles we're going to put on. Just wanted some different time on it. I wanted some different heat cycles going through there. I started this back, like I said, about a year and a half ago, so it's gone through some of these with the Holly and the Edelbrock, and part of the Mr. Gasket has gone through some hot summer months here in the Mid-South, so I wanted to see those conditions, and I also wanted to see some colder weather conditions. Fuel filters are a big thing. Now, if you look at my website and see any of my drawings on fuel system, the regulator is the last thing that goes before the carburetor. A lot of guys will put a filter right before the carburetor. Not saying it's a bad thing, but what you get with that, with a lot of fuel filters, and we did a test on that to see what the pressure drop was from the regulator through a filter and what the final pressure was. And a lot of fuel filters, the lower quality ones, some of the paper element ones are that way as well too, but some of the stainless is the same way, and some of the little small disc style filters will drop the pressure. Now the truck has two fuel filters on it. It has a 100 micron between the tank and the pump, and then from the pump, after the pump, I have a 40 micron regulator. You want that smaller micron to catch all the little stuff. So the regulator should be seeing very, very clean fuel, and that's key. You don't want a lot of dirty fuel to it. So that's kind of the setup in it. We'll talk about these here individually. The Spectra one's going on, and then we'll come back here very shortly, and we'll give you the rundown on each one of them, see what happened. This Holly regulator that I ran was on there for quite a while. It was probably closer to that 500 mile mark, like I mentioned earlier. The problem is maybe 300 miles in, 400 miles in. I couldn't tell you exactly when. It started to lose pressure, and I'm not under hood, and I don't have a gauge in the cab to monitor fuel pressure. I've considered adding one, but honestly, at this stage, I don't really need one, but maybe in the future. But frequently, cold, hot dry after a hot long drive somewhere, and the engine's fully operational, and certainly everything else under hood and under chassis, fuel line and all that stuff was warm enough. It didn't matter. It dropped pressure. What I believe happened is, and this is going to be difficult to see, you can still see a little bit of it left here. From the casting, there is a little bit of flash that was left over, and I think what happened is on the wet side of that diaphragm, there was enough of that in there that it got in and it blocked off some of that. Now, when I took it apart, there was some of that came out, so it was not something I could show exactly where it came out of, but certainly internally on that, it came loose. And as I disassembled it, take a look at it, the diaphragm's not torn. It seems to be in pretty decent shape. Not horrible. Probably still serviceable. Spring and everything else looks good. But again, seeing that flash in there and seeing a little bit of that when it came apart, I don't know if there's anything. Well, yeah, there's a little piece that just popped out of there. So I think that's what happened. I think you had some flash that got in there, restricted that outlet, and caused the pressure to drop. See if we can loosen up anything in there. Yeah, there's more of it that came out. So I believe that's what happened. Now, again, I'm speculating a little bit here, and I may pop the spring out of there and the check ball and kind of verify, but really at this stage, you can almost see, but I think that's just more of the dirt. But anyway, something to be conscious of, and I think that's the reason why this regulator started to not put out the pressure that he was supposed to. So that's a big part of it. I mean, setting and maintaining that pressure, given that everything else is in line. You've got enough fuel, the lines are in good condition, and there's no, the pump is putting out what it's supposed to. We're on a brand new pump, and I've verified that a number of times that it's the right pressure. Certainly something to be aware of on the lower end of these because, again, they just don't get the same amount of attention. They're, make them as fast as you can, as cheap as you can, and you get what you get. Let's talk about the Mr. Gasket next because this one was another one that gave me a lot of problems now. This is one that was on the truck. This is the one we just had on the bench a few minutes ago. Just one little detail. All of the hardware except for one was red Loctited in there. One I had to drill out. So these were fairly difficult to get out of there. Obviously, red Loctite. That one I could have loosened out with my hands. So neither here nor there, but certainly something to be concerned with. What I'm going to probably have to do is to see why we had the pressure drop on this one. And I can't take apart that little thing without, I don't think, destroying it. So but anyway, we'll try to break that apart here in a minute. But diaphragm looks good. Spring, let's see if we can find anything else in here. I haven't knocked this apart, but you can see how that mechanism works when you spin the dial. And what you're doing is you're just changing the tension on the spring. So what it's doing is it's either releasing the pressure or adding the pressure to it. It's kind of a unique little design. I don't dislike it. I'm certainly used to, a Allen wrench and a lock nut, but it's certainly unique. And if it works for them, great. I can't really see where this one was starting to lose all the pressure. I'm going to assume that it's probably within that check spring there, that check valve. So it may have what it may have done is maybe it got off center or something. I'm not exactly sure. I did adjust that quite a bit, just playing with it at different levels to see where it's at. I think most of the time on the GMC truck to get 6 PSI I was at a 4. But frequently, as the pressure was dropping, I would try it in 5 and 3, just trying to see if we could get the pressure to come back up, and it never did. So I can't see exactly the reason why this one had the failures or had the issues with the changing pressure, but it would be random. Sometimes at startup when it was very cold, it would be at 3 psi, and I've got 2 gauges, and I can verify what it is, pressure is, right after the pump and last filter. So I know what the pressure is after the filter, and then right before the regulator, and then right after the regulator. It would just be random times. So there's something in that either that was interfering with it or changing it that made it change the pressure. So not exactly sure why. I guess it's one that I'd have to just keep maybe digging, and maybe we'd find out the exact reason. But anyway, I don't dislike the design of it. I think it's actually kind of, unique, but it is certainly, the quality is maybe a little lacking. It's really hard to say. So don't know why, but this one had some inconsistent pressures. Sometimes it'd be fine, sometimes it wasn't. So here's the Edelbrock one. Again, this is a billet-bodied regulator. That's the one assembled. Here's one we just tore down, top part. It's easy to see the when you pay for something that's a little bit higher quality, the type of product that you get. So certainly no knock on any of the others for that, but they are a cheaper style of regulator, so they're going to be less I guess in the quality department. So diaphragm here, pretty simple, pretty basic design. One thing that was interesting as we was tearing all these apart, one thing to note here is you notice with the spring here, this one's the Edelbrock. Let me grab, that one's the Holly, and that was the one that was out of the Mr. Gasket. One thing to keep in mind here that I think, in theory, and I don't have a spring tester where I could test, these out individually, but I believe that the more coils and this conical style, taller type of spring is probably a little more sensitive to adjustment than something that's a little shorter and potentially a little stiffer. So that could be, a benefit to that style of regulator. And I'm assuming that the Spectra, I haven't knocked that one apart yet, and I don't know that I will, to be honest with you, because it's still on the truck and running. So I'm going to leave it alone, I think. But assuming that the Spectra is the same way. So again, I think just having a few more coils in there and being a little more forgiving as far as the adjustment goes and being maybe a little more sensitive to it, I think you can kind of see the difference in it. So I just wanted to point that out really quickly. Now, how it regulates the little check valve here, kind of see here. I'll get some close-ups of it, but yeah, it's a encapsulated piece. Very, very interesting how it's kind of put together. It's much bigger. The check ball is much bigger than the others that we torn apart, but I do like the cavity in there. It's got the ability to flow quite a bit more fuel, I think. So just something to be aware of. Again, the Edelbrock one, we didn't have any issues with it at all. When I set it at 6, it stayed pretty much there. You get a little bit of fluctuation with heat, but typically doesn't drop that much. If it drops by half a pound or so, I don't typically worry about that when it's, nice and warm and all that. But yeah, this one performed flawlessly, so I don't have any issues with it. But again, it's also the $142 regulator, so we're double or triple the amount of say the Mr. Gasket one. So or maybe it was the Holly that was the cheap one. I can't remember now, but I'll put it up on the screen, the prices of everything. But yeah, you get what you pay for, I guess. So just wanted to see what the inside of this one looked like, or show you what the inside of this one looked like, and see some of those differences. Again, I think the spring's a big one, but let's talk about the Spectra regulator. And this one, to be very honest with you, this one has surprised me. Right now, we're approximately, I think, a little less than 400 miles on this one. So I think we'll probably put another 100 on here this weekend. But, quite honestly, if it all settles out the same as it is before, I'm pretty happy with it. Pressure is maintained pretty spot on with it. I haven't really noticed any fluctuation with it at all. It's stayed right where it's supposed to, so I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm surprised. I anticipated that this was going to be one that was going to be of the poorer quality. I certainly don't like the hardware that they use, but I did check all that, at least on the outside, make sure it was good. And there's no leaks, the pressure stays consistent, whether it's cold or hot. I'm currently in about 75 degrees right now, so the temperature has been good and warm enough that if you're going to see some fluctuations with the heat, that it would show up. But quite honestly, it's been pretty spot on. So let's talk about the results here. Again, this took me forever to go through. Like I said, I started working on this a year and a half ago with, the Edelbrock regulator, and then we went to the Holly, the Gasket, and then the Spectra that's on the truck right now. And again, there's so many options out there with pressure regulator. These were just 4, again, that were the easiest that I think for the average person to get their hands on. So that was what I wanted to test out first. Now, if you strictly go by price, then, The gasket, the Holly, and the Spectre are the closest together, and all of them were under $60. 55, I think, was the highest. I can't remember, but certainly if you go on price alone, those cheaper ones are the ones to go with. But you're going to spend a heck of a lot more money, approximately three times as much money on the Edelbrock one, but do you get a better regulator? And I think resoundingly what I've found out is yes, that the higher quality part in this case yields higher quality results. So the Edelbrock in my mind is number one. It absolutely did exactly what it was supposed to do. It performed the way it should. It's going back on the truck once I'm, done with everything here. But no knock. The Spectra is probably number two, which is very shocking for me to say that. I quite honestly expected the Holly to be, in that number two slot, and quite honestly, that poor quality of just having those, that flash in there that, snapped apart here. You can see one of the great big chunks in there. I firmly believe that was the cause, based on the garbage that we knocked out of there. The reason why that regulator was not performing up to the standard it should. Now, are they all going to act that way? No, probably not. I mean, maybe that was an outlier. Maybe that was something rare, but I'm going to assume based on, the amount of information that we have that's probably fairly frequent that happens. And maybe that's the reason why those regulators tend to fail. But it was certainly the reason why I think this one, started to fluctuate pressure. So I'd go number three on the Holly. Now, the one that really had the worst results as far as pressure goes and being consistent all the time, and that was the Mr. Gasket one. And again, I don't think that was a surprise to me. I kind of expected it. It is the lowest. I feel anyway that it's the lowest quality. Again, I don't dislike the design. I think that's fairly unique, and I would love to see maybe a higher quality version of that for someone that just wants to be able to quickly set it by hand and take a look under, and maybe there's times where you run it at 6 psi, and then there's other times where you can dial that back to 5 or something. Again, I don't think it was any surprise, but, Edelbrock is number one, Spectre 2, Holly 3, and Gasket 4. If I was going to put any of those other than the Edelbrock one on, the one that surprises me the most is that Spectre one. And again, that was an AutoZone purchase. I'm 99% sure that's where it came from. So just something to keep in mind. But certainly on regulators and anytime you're dealing with fuel and fuel delivery, I think it's pretty important to pick one that's going to give you what you need. Anyway, I hope you got some information out of that one. Again, I know the price range was a little bit different, but I think the methodology here was spot on, and certainly you get what you pay for. So if you have any comments on this one or any questions, don't hesitate to leave them down below. Take a look at the other videos I've done on how to set up a fuel system. I think you'll find those pretty helpful. If you go to my website, all the downloads there are free as well, so you can take any of those charts that you need and set up your own fuel system. But pressure regulator is absolutely critical on a carburetor to making sure that you're in control of over what type of pressure it sees, and you're in control of that adjustment point. And having another one in a system that doesn't have that many isn't a bad thing. So we'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.